Welcome to the latest installment of Don't Take This as Gospel. I'm Mike Partika, and we are covering Dennis Prager's book, The Rational Bible, Exodus, God, Slavery, and Freedom. We're looking at the Ten Commandments. We're in Exodus chapter 20, and we have gotten to the Ninth Commandment, which is against lying. It says, "You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor." Now, interestingly, Dennis Prager says this phrase, against your neighbor, must mean something not obvious. Otherwise, the commandment would simply state, do not bear false witness. So, why does it add against your neighbor? The answer is that the commandment prohibits lying against, meaning to the detriment of your neighbor. The commandment is not against all lying. If you lie for moral reasons to aid your neighbor, as did, say, non-Jews who hid Jews during the Holocaust, such lying is allowed. Lying is sometimes moral. Those who argue that lying is always wrong have to explain why the rape, torture, and murder of innocents is morally preferable to telling a lie in order to save them. Now, I like the way that he puts the emphasis on against your neighbor and uses that in the rescuing Jews during the Holocaust analogy or example. And the reason for that is that I once debated this on a Catholic forum, and I really wasn't satisfied by the answers I were getting from the Catholics there. They were basically saying that lying, yes, lying is a venial sin, but God will quickly forgive you for that. But my understanding, at least at the time, of Christianity is that God always provides you a way not to sin. If you are, at least if you're a Christian, I don't know if that's true for non Christians, but at least if you're a Christian, God will always provide a way out of temptation that does not require you to sin. And I would have to look up the particular scriptures to back that up, but there's basically a scripture in there where either Paul or the writer of Hebrews says something to the effect of, God, no matter how strong the temptation, will provide the way to get out of it. Something like that. So, in that case, then, of the German soldier who's knocking on your door and saying, do you have any Jews inside? Of course, you have the option to say yes or no, but if you say no and you are hiding Jews, then you're telling a lie. And if lying is wrong all the time, then God would not want you to lie. I mean, that's just it. Flat, simple. I mean, even if you believe, as I believe it is correct to believe, that there is such a thing as mortal sins and venial sins, you would still be morally obligated not to lie because the objective is not to sin. In all cases, not to sin. So if lying is 100% sinful, then even telling a lie to save someone's life or to save someone from extreme trauma is sin, and you shouldn't do it. So basically, I was not satisfied by the Catholic argument of, well, yeah, it's a venial sin and God will forgive you, blah, blah, blah. Just go to confession or just look at an icon or just look at, a picture of the Virgin Mary and, say a prayer and God will forgive you. I mean, literally, that's what they were telling me. Not satisfying in the least. But this explanation on Dennis Prager's part was satisfying. In that the command literally says, do not bear false witness against your neighbor. So, how does against your neighbor reckon up in the case of lying to protect Jews from the Nazis? Because there's two neighbors involved. Let's be clear. First, there's the Jews that you're hiding. Now, obviously, a lie that you tell to save them from the Nazis is benefiting them, so it's not against them, it's for them. But what about the Nazi? Because the Nazi is your neighbor too. I mean, let's remember what Jesus said. The lawyer asked him, the lawyer, because you can legally try to get around anything. Jesus said that you're correct, Mr. Lawyer Guy. The command does say, love your neighbor as yourself. And then the lawyer responded to him and said, well, who's my neighbor? And Jesus, eventually giving the parable of the Good Samaritan was basically saying you are a neighbor to whoever you move next to. So being a neighbor is your job, and you are to be a neighbor to everyone. There's not supposed to be a restriction. There's not supposed to be a classification between neighbors and enemies. It's not that the world is full of neighbors on one hand and enemies on the other hand. Everyone is your neighbor. So you can't escape by saying, okay, well, I'm supposed to love my neighbor as myself, but I'm just going to consider these people my neighbors, and that way I can be crappy to everyone else. No, that's not how it works. So given that the Nazi is also your neighbor, how is your lying to the Nazi not lying against the Nazi? Well, what is the Nazi bound to do? The Nazi is bound to murder the Jews who were in your house. So by lying to the Nazi, you are actually working on behalf of the Nazi's soul to protect him from becoming a murderer, from adding murder to the list of things that he is personally responsible for. Now, he may already have, crimes, more than enough crimes on his soul to damn him, but at least you've done your part to help him by lying to him and saying, nope, no Jews here. So I like that. I do like that. But the problem I have is, where do you draw the line? Because in that case, it seems clear that you've got multiple parties involved, and your lying helps all of them. But it's very, very easy to tell yourself that. It's very, very easy to say, my lie is not hurting anyone. My lie is just helping. My lie is just doing good. My lie is fine. There's no harm. It's not against anyone. So, for example, let's say that your friend comes to you and says, hey, I've got, 5 years of experience, but this job that I'm applying for says I need 7 years of experience. So I need you to tell the person, at your company who's doing the hiring that I actually have 7 years of experience. Okay, you could say, yeah, okay, sure, fine. I'm just lying to help you, right? And you might actually believe that's all that matters. But the fact is that your hiring manager, the person who's doing the hiring, is looking specifically for somebody who has 7 years of experience. And you might think that your friend's 5 years of experience are more intense than maybe the person who on average has 7 years of experience. Maybe you are familiar with your friend's work to the point where you know that your friend's a genius at what he's wanting to do. But at the same time, you're lying to your hiring manager about your friend's qualifications, thinking, oh, well, I'm helping, my hiring manager too, because if my hiring manager knew that my friend only has 5 years experience, then he would not hire my friend, and therefore he would not receive the benefit of my friend's genius. Do you see how easy it is to justify lies if you can justify it by saying it's only in a good cause? And even something to the extent of, does my hair look good? I hear the example. It's like, well, are you going to tell the truth and say your hair looks like crap? Well, on one hand, that's a very subjective thing. I mean, if she's saying, does my hair look good to you? You may have an opinion, and what good does it do to share it? But if she's really wondering, should I go out the door looking like this? And you think, because, it looks like she got hit by the ugly club, then if you lie, who are you really helping? You might be just lying to save yourself from whatever tongue lashing she's going to give you for telling her hair looks horrible. But at the same time, if you don't lie, or if you don't lie, then, and you tell her hair looks horrible, then you may save her the embarrassment of having gone out in public looking like that. I can't tell you which of those is the better thing, okay? You can tell I've never been married because Married guys would probably be able to answer that one in a question. It's like, oh no, just like, yeah. But I don't know if that's the case or not. But I almost suspect that's the case. Um, so you don't. It's hard to say. It's hard to say. When do you really know that the only thing that's happening is good that can come out of your lie? And the fact that you're not omniscient, you're not capable of really knowing what all is going to be the result of your lying versus the truth. It's almost for the same reasons. If you look at the other commandments where you talk about, you can't steal, you can't take an innocent life, you can't murder. When you look at commandments like that, and you realize that God can essentially do those things. God has it within his power to take property or take life because he has ownership of all of it. I mean, he's the owner of all creation. So, and God knows how these things can best be used. So if it is better for the world overall for someone to die, God can take that person's life. But that's a prerogative that only God has because of God's omniscience. In the same way, if God wants to take property from one person or cause a person to lose property so that someone else can gain it, you might look at that as a sort of theft, but at the same time, number one, God has ownership of everything, and number two, God knows how resources ought to be best distributed. In the same way, communists don't. Got a little political there. And God's omniscience makes up for the fact that, otherwise with us, it would be just flat stealing. Again, hello, communists. Sorry, I'm trying not to make this too political. So, in that same vein, if you're thinking, okay, well, my lie is going to accomplish thus and so, you don't really know that. You don't have the omniscience of God to say your falsehood is actually going to result in a better scenario than the truth would. So I'm not sure that there's a consistency here with this argument that it's okay to lie, in certain circumstances. I'm not sure about that. Even though, yes, I acknowledge that telling the truth could result in horrible consequences. Horrible consequences. I mean, just take the Nazi Holocaust example. You tell the truth to the Nazi and the Jews wind up going off to the gas chambers. That's bad. Do you know for a fact that it's as bad as if they had lived? Because, looking from the divine standpoint, you might think, oh my God, that's ridiculous. But looking from the divine standpoint, maybe a couple generations down the road, the family you're hiding would produce a grandchild or great-grandchild who goes on to commit a mass murder. So was the loss of that family a better result than having the great-grandchild who is going to go and murder several families? That's the kind of thing that only God can sort out. That's not something a human being can sort out. So you're wanting to weigh in the balance, here's what I think is good versus here's what I think is bad and all that kind of stuff, as opposed to just taking the line of do only good, tell only truth. I honestly don't know. I know it leads to what seem like logical absurdities, but we're talking about religion here, so occasionally you're going to run into some of those. So, the last thing I wanted to say was let's take that at face value and say that, okay, it is okay to lie so long as lying is for the good of all involved. All right, let's accept that. Can God lie? Can God lie if it means that everyone will be edified by that lie? For example, let's take the Genesis narrative. The Genesis narrative describes a 6-day creation followed by a 7th day of rest. Man is created on the 6th day. And death, as presented by the Genesis story, is not something endemic to the human condition until after Adam and Eve sin and fall from grace. Now, compare that with what we now know of evolution and the fossil record and our genetics, all of which point to the notion that humanity is descended from a common ancestor that we share with other primates like gorillas and chimpanzees and orangutans and so much, and whichever other primates there are, that we're all just another branch off of this great tree of life. And death, therefore, necessarily had to be part of our existence from the get-go. There could not have been a time that we were not dying. In fact, it took millions upon millions of years of death to get to the human branch of the family tree, the big family tree of life. And yet the Bible in Genesis places death and the responsibility for death at the feet of human beings and saying, your disobedience is the reason you die. Is that a lie told for our benefit? That's a tough one to sort out. And I don't really feel like anybody who I have encountered who believes in evolution and who attempts to reconcile that with the Genesis narrative, I don't think there's anyone who's really successfully come up with a reconciliation for that that's very satisfying. I know I was never able to develop one, and none of the people who I sought out, up to and including religious scientists like Francis Collins of the National Institutes of Health. He was head of the Human Genome Project. He wrote a book called The Language of God in which he argued for theistic evolution. But how does theistic evolution reconcile with the Genesis narrative? I don't see how it does. I don't see how it's even supposed to. Now, maybe all of this can be resolved if we accept that God can lie. If God can lie to, convince us to our benefit that, that we are responsible for dying on account of our sins, and sets up everything else in the Bible all based around that, so that we can have a better, more harmonious world, so long as we believe that. Well, I suppose that's possible, but that kind of undermines the whole idea that God is the repository of truth, that all your ways are truth, quote unquote, that God cannot lie. If God can lie, how do we know anything in the Bible is true? That's a very valid question. So it's all, lying is one of the most really, really messy subjects when it comes to religion, when it comes to the Bible, when it comes to how God is portrayed, when it comes to what our responsibilities are. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. I can just basically say I do like Jordan. Now, Jordan Peterson's, one of his 12 rules for life is tell the truth, or at least don't lie. I got to tell you, as much wisdom as Jordan Peterson's been putting out into the world, I would say that's the best policy insofar as you can handle it. Because sometimes we're telling the truth. There is a burden and there is a responsibility that comes with that. And sometimes that burden can be pretty unenviable. But at the same time, the weight of lies, and of lies that come revealed over time, that can be a pretty hefty burden too. So this was a pretty long discourse on lying, and I don't know if I managed to impart any wisdom on that or not. So I'm just going to hope that in everything that I've said, I've at least told you the truth. and leave it to that. I'll leave you to figure out the rest. I'm Mike Partika. This has been Don't Take This as Gospel. Again, if you have the opportunity, do pick up a copy of Dennis Prager's book, The Rational Bible, Exodus, God, Slavery, and Freedom. You can pick it up at the affiliate link I've got in the video description. And please subscribe to make sure you're notified of future episodes. And I will talk to you later.